Not 110 volts. Now tell me about the theory of science. Touch it.
I don't see why we can't have a reasonable discussion between two men of science who hold different views and different interpretations of the data. I don't know why we can't do that.
Here is Satan. He wants God's blessing for the devil's work.
May I say it was the most disgusting performance I've ever witnessed in my life. And I've had...
In 1988, an amazing debate changed the course of history in the creation-evolution controversy in my country, Australia. And revisiting that night 20 years later and interviewing people who were there, interspersed with excerpts from the debate itself, will give you an insight into why it was such a pivotal event in Australia and the lessons to be gained from it. Now, we've obtained a full copy of the 1988 debate, and it features at the end of this documentary. At the time of the debate, I'd only been the head of the creation ministry here in Australia, which is now called Creation Ministries International, for a matter of a few months. The debate was organised in Sydney, and it was between Dr. Duane Gish, a visiting scientist from the American Institute for Creation Research, and an evolutionist geology professor, a member of the Australian Skeptics, Dr. Ian Plimer. And 4 years later, the same man launched a brazen national TV campaign to promote his book, Attacking Our Ministry, in effect. It had the provocative title, Telling Lies for God, but more on that later. That debate was truly astonishing, and it made newspaper headlines. Gish approached it in his normal, civilised manner, but everyone was totally unprepared for the incredible approach taken by the evolutionist. Dr. Plimer later boasted to the papers that his approach was to take no bull ... and take no prisoners. And although he was a self-confessed atheist, he even used quotes from the Bible to try to attack Gish personally.
All we are left with is going to the Bible. And I go to Revelation 16 and 13, and I read, "And I saw 3 unclean spirits, like frogs, come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet."
As we look back on the debate, you'll hear from 2 people who were there 20 years ago. Dr. Mark Brunacci, a medical doctor from Sydney, and at that time he was at uni still, and Sean Farnan, who's now a media producer, but back then in 1988 he was part of an ABC TV crew that was sent to film the debate for a science program on Australia's national broadcaster. Also on this DVD you'll hear comments from a leading US anti-creationist skeptic, Jim Lippard. Now, I want to make it clear that, Lippard has often been very critical of the arguments of Dr. Gish and other prominent creationists. But we asked him to appear because he was prepared at the time of the debate to publish material which was highly critical of Dr. Plimer's contribution to that extraordinary event. Now, here's the story of how Jim Lippard was introduced to the creation-evolution debate.
I was first exposed to the creation-evolution debate when a young earth creationist spoke at my church. It was a gentleman by the name of Beryl Eads, author of a book called Let the Evidence Speak. And I was very impressed with his presentation, and I purchased and read a copy of his book and considered myself a persuaded young earth creationist. I proceeded to study it further, as well as argue in favor of young earth creationism at my Catholic high school that I attended. In the course of arguing for creationism, I ended up engaging in debates with other people, both in person and online, and ultimately ended up investigating anti-creationist materials, and came to the conclusion that that I had been presented with inaccurate arguments for a young earth. In fact, several of the arguments in the book Let the Evidence Speak were arguments that Creation Ministries International has pointed out as arguments that should not be used by young earth creationists. And as a result of that, I ultimately abandoned my faith and ended up becoming an atheist.
I first saw the debate on video, and it was a bit distressing at the time. But I had no idea till years later of the many people who had been turned to the truth of the Bible precisely because of this extraordinary event. And this debate was only the beginning of Ian Plimer's anti-creationist campaign. In 1992, he wrote his book, Telling Lies for God, and in that he made many outrageous claims about our ministry's morals, our ethics, and our finances. It even included the claim that we were racists. I mean, our whole ministry is incredibly anti-racist. Part of our message is that everyone goes back to Adam and Eve, so we're all closely related. But Plimer's supporting evidence for that was supposedly my upbringing in South Africa, whereas in fact at that time I'd never set foot on the continent of Africa in my life. And people were saying, well, if it's not true, why don't they sue? And he openly bragged in print that he'd divested all of his assets in the expectation that he'd been sued. And he was being given airtime repeatedly on national TV, and he was supported by a prominent archbishop who later became Australia's head of state. And many Christian groups and Christian newspapers repeated his claims, and so many Christians even held back on their support of our ministry, and frankly it was starting to bite. So we invited Australia's most renowned anti-corruption figure, former Chief Magistrate Clary Breeze, to chair a committee of prominent Christians to investigate all of Plimer's charges, and we just promised to publish all of the findings regardless of their outcome in national newspapers. And when their report came out, and for us, not surprisingly, soundly denouncing the book's fabricated claims, all of that clamour died down overnight. By the way, a copy of this report is on this DVD, which can be accessed by your computer. But the amazing thing, and the reason I'm mentioning it here, is that our support didn't just recover, it actually shot up to a whole new level, a level from which it never retreated. The debate and everything that followed, it put our ministry on the map in a way we could never have planned.
We're here to debate this question of creation versus evolution. Why?